Welcome to the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Here we talk about the connection between creativity and healing, and how we are creative and how creativity helps us heal mentally, physically, and emotionally. Join us now. Hi everyone, Larissa Russell of Creative You Healing, and welcome to the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Today I have with me Tina Fumo. Tina is an author due to a tragic story that happened to her family. She recounts that story in her book, Fancy Prison. An instinctual pull as old as time, a grandmother wanting to hold her newborn grandchild. Tina travels to a small Canadian town and finds herself in the most stressful ordeal of her life. The authorities have apprehended her 2-week-old grandbaby. What her and her family go through to get their baby back will absolutely shock you. So welcome, Tina.
Good morning, Larissa.
Well, I'm happy to have you. I read your book, and first we'll start. You just share a little bit of your story and your path, and then I have some questions for you that we'll touch on. But yes,
sure, sure. Well, me in a nutshell, I am a first-generation Italian-Canadian girl. I was born in Ontario, and that's where I grew up, and I got all my education I went to, of course, being Italian, I went to a Catholic school and high school, and then I went to university in Toronto. And after I graduated, I heard there were lots of jobs out west, so jumped on a plane, and I never went back. And so the majority of my life has been lived in this tiny mountain town of Banff. I lived there for about 30 years. So over half my life, and I became a mother there, and I worked there, and eventually when my daughter grew up, as children tend to do, she went off into the world, and I met my soon-to-be husband, and so I'm with him. I'm still with him, and I decided to leave Banff and make the move to Edmonton, which is where you and I both reside, and and then so the story happens when my daughter, who moved away, she moved to a neighboring province, British Columbia, and she had her baby. And for the most part, she wasn't doing that great in a small town. Like, I knew she was making a mistake moving there from Banff, because she'd been a Banff kid. I mean, Banff is a pretty unique town, but since when do kids always listen to their parents? So I knew she was making a mistake there. She really struggled there there was no jobs, housing, all the issues that a lot of small communities face. And then boom, she got pregnant and had a baby girl. And so that's what the story of Fancy Prison is about. We were really lucky because we had a family friend who turned into our biggest advocate, Suzanne. And I honestly I don't know what we would have done without her. And I'm fairly certain our outcome would have been a lot different if we hadn't had Suzanne on our side. So that's kind of the intro as to where I'm at. And then that's the story that I recount in Fancy Prison, which you read. So maybe what questions you have about the book.
Well, I'm going to ask the question that because everybody that I've talked to about this is like, well, they must have done something to deserve it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And you address this in the book, but can you touch on that? Because it's just shocking to me. Shocking.
Yeah. No. And you know what, Larissa, that is a normal human emotion. And I really think that MCFD and Child Protective Services, they exploit that human emotion, because that is always the first go-to that people are, well, she must have done something wrong. She must have done something to deserve this. And the question is, no, she didn't. Actually, she made mistakes. She was trying her best, and which is what we used to do in our generation. Only trying her best didn't mean having social workers wait for you to make a mistake and then go, aha, we caught you. Now we're taking your kid. We didn't live with that kind of fear, right? So the answer to your question is, we suspect that the woman that, there was a lady upstairs who was living in the same house as my daughter. We suspect that she called CPS or MCFD saying that, she's using meth or something like that. which wasn't even true. And we had evidence to support that fact, because they coerced a signature out of my daughter, which again is another issue, like to go and coerce someone to sign something. They go into her medical records, they get her pH. Again, we suspect that, that's what they did, because they're not really forthcoming with all this stuff that they do, because I really question how much of this is legal, okay? Because it just seems to me they trample all over human rights. And the tests were coming back clean for her urine. They were coming back clean for the umbilical cord, for the testing of that. And so when I arrived in town, they were kind of exploiting the fact that, oh, well, we've sent her placenta off to be tested, kind of planting a seed of doubt in my mind to set up that, sort of Friday showdown, where I really think that they were planting seeds of doubt in me so that I would turn on my daughter in front of them and start yelling at her and getting angry at her. And then again, they would go, aha, you're not a stable grandparent, blah, blah, blah. We're taking your grandchild. And none of that happened. Like, she was clear, the test came back clean. Well, actually, we still don't know what happened with the placenta, but the test came back clean. I didn't flip out in front of them or, blame my daughter. I was just really confused as to what was going on and just trying to reconcile, like, wait a second, I thought social workers are supposed to help people. So why do I feel judged and exploited? And why do I feel like there's some kind of hidden agenda going on here that you are not being very honest about at all? So it was a really frustrating situation.
Yeah. And how long was your granddaughter gone from?
27 days, which as far as these cases go, that was a very short amount of time. But I can assure you, it was the longest 27 days of my life, because so much of it, like I said, is you're confused. So we just didn't know what next stunt they were going to pull, or what next accusation they were going to pull. And all you had to do is wait till Friday afternoon, right at 5:00, and then boom, they drop another, well, now we're keeping the baby for this reason. It just seemed to be very systematic. They would just input whatever reason at a certain time in the playbook, to suit their narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fascinating to me. And then some of the other stories that you shared of other people, like the poor woman whose child died in foster care, right?
Yeah. I've developed an interesting relationship with Jamie and Marilyn this year, because this is the little baby you're talking about here, Delana. So obviously I contacted them last year at this time, like January, February of 2021, to ask them their permission to use the cover, a picture of Delana on the cover, because at that point I was writing my book, and then I was starting to think about, well, how do I want to present it? What do I want on the cover? So the relationship I've had with Jamie and Marilyn has changed in the past year. And at the end of my book, I say how we can't forget these little babies. Like, this has to mean something. What we went through, what a lot of parents are going through, this little baby Delana Sullivan who died 6 days after being in foster care, this has to mean something, and we have to continue fighting. So at the end of my book, I say how I will someday go and visit Delana's grave. And that day has come and gone. And it was really, I'm going to start crying now, because it was just so frustrating. And I was so angry and saddened at the same time to be standing at the grave of this little girl who used to be a healthy 4-month-old baby. Like, none of this is making any sense at all. And it's why I call BS on this system. So we need to stop making judgments. Like you said, the people that you've told, they automatically go, oh, well, they must have the reason. So boom, that needs to stop right now, okay? Because you need to keep an open mind, and you need to start listening to these parents and what they're going through. Because I guarantee you, anybody with some logical common sense, when you start to understand, oh, okay, well, what, they did this, and what, you're trying to do this, and you will start to understand that no, a lot of these cases are just really embellished. They're very one-sided. They only just focus on the negative. They don't give you the benefit of the doubt. There's no objectivity at all. And like, how is this Canada? Right? This is just, it was a very frustrating situation. Yeah. Fortunately for us, we healed because we got our baby back, but I don't know where we'd be right now if we were still like fighting the system to find out where they put her and where she was. And because I think one of the first things they would have done is change her birth certificate and change her name. Yeah.
Well, and our first thought or second thought maybe then is, well, shouldn't the baby go to a family member, which would have been you, right? Yeah. And then, so that didn't happen. And then, okay, well, you've proven that the allegations are wrong with the tests. Shouldn't you get your baby back? Nope, that's not how it worked. You still have to hire a lawyer, go to court for all of these things. And you'd think that, once you've proven repeatedly that the allegations are incorrect, that it would be over.
Okay, so I'm going to interject there a couple of times. So they don't give you an opportunity to prove your side of the case. So any kind of justice that we got was in the form of a lawyer preparing that report that I put into the book. And that was me forcing the issue. We never got to say to a judge, hey, look, this is what they're saying, but we have proof that negates what they're saying. So, and everything that they're saying is all past tense, past tense, past tense. There's no new information. And any new information they're gathering, they're only using negative information. So it was incredibly one-sided and very rigged. And so so I'm going to refer to that as a mechanism, though, because once they took the baby, they made a big mistake, and they knew that they made a big mistake. I don't know, like to this day, I don't know why they thought they would get away with it. In the end, I think that they realized that they just picked the wrong family, but they just sort of pigeonholed us into these labels that, oh, they thought my daughter was poor white trash. They just pigeonholed me into, oh, well, she must have inherited problems from her mother, which wasn't the case. My daughter is her own being, and she lives her own life and makes her own mistakes, just like I did. But it's very, very difficult, and it's disingenuous for this whole system to expect parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles to appear in court and prove on paper how much you love your child and how committed you are to their future. Like it's ridiculous. So much of this really needs to be out of court. And they exploit the adversarial situations that are created in court because they know how to use the timelines in court. They know how to file affidavits. They're quite skilled at. To me, that seems to be their only skill, is that they're quite good at being glorified law clerks. But I just saw no evidence of them actually working with families. And that's what I call, in my book, call BS on. And I just saw no evidence of them actually trying to prevent separating the baby from the family, which... they say it's supposed to be their last resort, but again, I saw no evidence of that. To me, it seemed to be the first thing that they wanted to do. And after they did that, they kept having to go back to that because they basically had to cover their butts because they realized that, no, you shouldn't have taken the baby in the first place. You had no legal right to do it. The grandmother was right there. I recorded everything, and it's just like, yeah, to this day, I don't know what they were thinking.
Yeah. And this is not a one-off case, right? You've met many people who have had similar situations happen. And many of them did not get their children back.
No.
Even though they had no reason to be taken in the first place.
Yeah. Or if they did give a reason at the time, like in our case, I think at the time they gave the reason that, oh, well, she breached her safety plan agreement. Which again, to me, when I go back and read that safety plan, it was just setting her up to fail. Like, for example, in the safety plan, she couldn't have contact with the father of the baby because they weren't living together. And I'm like, okay, well, so this is a small town. So say my daughter's walking down the street and she bumps into the father of the baby. And of course, he wants to see his baby, kind of thing. Does that constitute a breach of the safety plan and then thereby give you grounds to take the baby? I mean, this is ridiculous, like it just seemed to me like a lot of the paperwork that they were creating and then for like putting a lot of pressure on my daughter to sign. It was just setting her up to fail. It was just some little thing in there that, oh, she'll never be able to do that. And then we'll catch her on that and then take the baby then. Right. But so in my book, I do mention like about 3 to 4 months into our serving out the court orders, they did the same thing to me, sent me the forms, expecting me to just sign it. And they did. They actually expected me to sign this. And I'm like, I'm not signing this. Like, I read through it. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. But they kept sending the social worker over and they kept sending me the forms. And I would have loved to have been a fly in the wall that morning after I managed to kill about a month of their time, sitting in that social worker's office when they realized, yeah, Grammy's not signing these forms. It's like, why would I? You think I trust you? I don't trust you people, okay? Like, nothing that you've done up to this point has made any sense.
Yeah, yeah. It's a harrowing story when you think about it, right? But I want to move on to sort of the healing part of that. And how was writing the story part of your healing journey?
Oh, for me, it was like, I remember a day in April. So when we went through this in March and we were just shattered, like we were just so traumatized. And then I got my family out of BC, which really helped create that provincial boundary. And I remember a day in April writing everything out, and it took 2 or 3 hours, but I wanted to write it while it was still raw, and the feelings were, and it was so cathartic. Just that after, and the little baby, she was sleeping beside me in the bassinet as I wrote, and I was like, I was so angry writing things out, and then look over her and just be overwhelmed with love, and then go back to my writing and write out these frustrations. And so, yeah, to me, for sure, it was really cathartic. Writing it out. And of course, my book had to be a little more polished than that, because I think if I ever showed readers that sort of initial writing, they'd be like, because there was a lot more F-bombs in it, let's put it that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, getting that anger out. And yeah. So is this something you've always done? Have you always been a writer? Have you?
Yeah. I've never published a book before, but all of my life, when I've gone through confusing situations, I find it really helps to pour out my feelings in the written word, and cursive. Like I think now, of course, when you publish a book, you have to be on the computer so much because you got to email it back and forth to the publisher with editing and stuff like that. But the actual physical artistic expression of writing out cursive with your hand, with a pen meets paper, to me, that is just, it's just such a release and of emotion and working through, whatever confusion you're going through.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And it's something I teach my students as well, is when you're typing, you can go much faster than you can actually think through it, right? And when you handwrite, you allow yourself to immerse in it. So you can actually release, and there's a connection to what you're actually writing that you don't get when you're typing.
Yeah, I don't know how fast you type, but I don't think I type that fast. I think cursively when I do write it out, and you're, like you said, you're immersed in it. What happens too is that your handwriting is an extension of how you're feeling, because that, like I said, that first draft, it would have been messy and, scratching out here and there, but that's part of, just getting those emotions out onto paper, is that style of handwriting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I ask all my guests this, but what does healing with creativity mean to you?
Oh, healing with creativity. I think it's that expression of feelings, and how, okay, if you can get out, particularly negative feelings, because it's not good to carry that negativity. It's not good to carry that trauma. So when you're able to get it out of you, you can almost recreate who you are. It's like you're starting afresh. Yeah, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go today?
No, I guess where to find my book.
I'll have
I don't
your
know
links.
if you're, yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, if you read the book and you like the book, and by all means, plug it for other people to read it and buy it on Amazon, and that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a story, I have to say, that I would never have even thought of, because, I have to say, growing up a middle-class white woman in Canada, it was not something I ever thought about, having my kids taken away, and so I have to say, I always just thought, well, there has to be a reason, right? If social services involved, there has to be a reason. But reading your story and then hearing about the other people, and it's like, wow, this is really frightening. The power that they have.
Yeah, it is frightening for sure. Yeah. And I didn't write the book to frighten people. I wrote the book to raise awareness about it, because I do think that most people are like you, and the closest you ever want to come to this experience is to read about it. You don't want to go through it at all, because it just, the time, like they can go in and they can exploit a situation and they can shatter your life like that by that one action. But the time that it takes you to heal and work through what they do in an instant, again, it's just such an imbalance of how unfair it is, and how much they exploit the power that they have to be able to take children from loving homes.
Yeah. My heart breaks for those women. I'm so glad your daughter got her daughter back.
Yeah. Oh, nobody more than us. Yeah. She's 4 years old now, and she'll be 5 next month, and she was worth the fight. That's for sure.
I have a granddaughter who'll be 5 next month as well. And so I totally feel that. So, I want to thank you again, Tina, for being here today.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
To our listeners, we will see you again next time. And in the meantime, I wish for you amazingly creative days. Thank you for listening. If you found our podcast of interest, we'd love for you to leave a review wherever you listen in.